Emma had left the office later than usual, the kind of evening when the sky is a soft mix of pink and orange, the sun hiding behind distant clouds, casting long shadows across the streets, and even the air seemed heavy with anticipation. She was tired, her shoulders stiff from typing in meetings, her mind replaying every small disappointment of the day, and all she wanted was the warmth of her apartment, the quiet hum of her own space, a cup of tea, maybe a favorite book, something to calm the storm inside her. Her car rolled along familiar roads, the tires making a steady rhythm against the asphalt, a sound she had always found comforting, almost meditative, like it could steady the chaos in her mind. She wasn't expecting anything unusual that evening, just the predictable scenery of the town she had known all her life, the same lampposts lighting the same streets she had walked and driven countless times, the soft rustle of leaves in the wind, the occasional dog barking somewhere far off, the familiar smells of bakery bread and distant rain. And yet, there was a strange energy, a sense of something waiting just beyond the ordinary, a feeling she couldn't shake, like the world had paused for a moment, holding its breath. That's when she noticed him, standing under a flickering street lamp that cast uneven shadows across his face, a man who looked both hesitant and somehow familiar, as if he had stepped out of a dream she couldn't quite remember. He was alone, hands tucked into his pockets, shoulders slightly slouched, giving off a quiet vulnerability that caught her attention immediately. Emma felt an unexplainable pull, a tug at the heart she had long thought careful and closed off. Without thinking twice, she slowed the car and rolled down the window, the wind brushing her hair, carrying a soft scent of damp earth and autumn leaves, and asked, "Do you need a ride?" The man looked up, surprise flickering in his eyes, and after a brief pause, nodded almost imperceptibly before opening the door and sliding into the passenger seat. His presence was quiet but heavy, like he carried stories in the way he sat, the way he avoided eye contact, the way his fingers tapped nervously against his knee. Emma introduced herself, and he replied, "Liam," his voice soft, but not shy, carrying a weight that made her heart skip a beat. The car moved again, smoothly gliding over the streets, and the silence between them was not awkward but filled with potential, a delicate tension that hummed like electricity. Emma glanced at him from the corner of her eye, noticing the way he stared out the window, his jaw tight, as if holding back thoughts he wasn't ready to share, and a strange curiosity bubbled inside her. She wanted to ask who he was, why he looked so out of place, why there was something in his gaze that seemed to recognize her, even if they had never met. Instead, she said nothing, letting the quiet settle, letting the rhythm of the tires and the faint music from the car radio fill the spaces between unspoken words. Liam eventually broke the silence, a small, almost hesitant question about the roads, asking if she had lived in the town all her life, and that sparked a conversation that began cautiously but quickly picked up a rhythm, a dance of words that felt surprisingly natural. He spoke of small things, the streets, the way the town had changed over the years, the stores that had closed and new places that had opened, and there was a wistfulness in his tone, a hint of longing for things he didn't explain. Emma responded with her own memories, stories of childhood, of friends and family, of places she had loved and lost, and the car seemed to shrink around them, the world outside fading until it was just the two of them suspended in this fleeting, unexpected moment. She noticed small things about him, the way he smiled faintly when recalling a memory, the way he gestured subtly with his hands, the way his eyes softened when he spoke of things that mattered to him. It was unlike any conversation she had had in years, full of quiet honesty, unhurried yet charged with emotion, a strange intimacy that didn't need explanation. They shared laughs, small confessions, minor frustrations about work and life, and she felt a warmth spreading in her chest, a fluttering that made her pulse quicken in ways she hadn't anticipated. Every street they passed seemed to mark the passage of time differently, each stoplight a heartbeat in the growing connection between them, and she realized with a jolt that her evening had taken a turn she could never have expected when she first left her office, tired and ready for solitude. As they neared the area where he had said he lived, Emma noticed a subtle hesitation in him, a shadow passing across his features, like he was unsure whether to leave or stay. He thanked her softly, almost whispering, and she felt a pang of disappointment even as she smiled politely. "Drive safe," he said, lingering for a moment before opening the door, and she watched him step out into the night, the street lamp flickering one last time over his head. She felt a strange emptiness as the car door closed, a quiet ache that left her heart strangely tender. She drove away slowly, glancing in the rearview mirror, seeing him standing there, staring at her car as if he had been waiting for something, or someone, all his life. Emma's mind raced, a jumble of curiosity and wonder, the ordinary night transformed into something extraordinary, something she couldn't yet name. The streetlights blurred as she drove faster, the wind whipping through the window, and yet, inside her, a calm clarity began to grow, an understanding that sometimes the smallest choices, the briefest interactions, could alter the course of one's life in ways that were profound and unexpected. She felt a mix of excitement and apprehension, the thrill of a story that had just begun, a connection that felt too intense to ignore, a moment suspended between past regrets and future possibilities. The quiet hum of the engine became a meditation, her mind replaying the subtle gestures, the soft laughter, the way his eyes seemed to look right through her, and she realized that tonight, one simple drive had shifted something deep inside her, changing her perception of what was possible, what might happen next. She wondered if he felt it too, the delicate pull between two people who had never met but somehow recognized each other in the flickering streetlights and soft evening air, and a smile curved her lips despite the fatigue that weighed on her. As she reached her street, the world seemed to hold its breath again, the night quiet except for distant sounds of cars and the occasional dog, and she parked, stepping out of the car slowly, savoring the lingering warmth in her chest. Emma unlocked her door and paused for a moment, leaning against the frame, thinking about the fleeting stranger named Liam, about the quiet intensity in his gaze, about the way one small, ordinary action, a simple offer of a ride, had created a ripple across her carefully contained world. The night seemed to hum with possibility, a promise of stories yet to unfold, of emotions yet to be discovered, and she knew, deep in her heart, that she would never forget this evening, this drive, this stranger who had entered her life so quietly but left a mark so profound. She went inside, closed the door behind her, but the memory of the flickering street lamp, the gentle tension, and the warmth of shared conversation followed her like a gentle echo, a reminder that life's most extraordinary moments often arrive in the guise of the simplest, most unexpected gestures, and that this was only the beginning of something far larger than she could imagine, a story that had quietly begun on one drive home and would change everything forever. The next morning, Emma woke up with a lingering sense of wonder she couldn't shake, her thoughts drifting immediately to Liam, to the quiet intensity in his eyes, the subtle vulnerability he had carried as he stepped into her car the night before, and she found herself smiling despite the rush of the day ahead, realizing how unexpected encounters could leave marks that no ordinary routine could erase. At work, she moved through her tasks mechanically, her mind half in meetings, half replaying every small detail of their ride, the way he had spoken softly but with a depth that seemed to reach into hidden corners of her heart, the way his fingers had nervously tapped against his knee, the faint crease in his brow whenever he recalled a memory, and she couldn't help but imagine what other pieces of him might exist behind that quiet exterior. Lunchtime offered little distraction, and she found herself wandering through familiar streets, half expecting to see him somewhere in the crowd, half hoping for another chance, though she had no reason to expect it, and yet the heart, she realized, often hoped without reason. That evening, as she walked past her favorite cafe, she nearly collided with someone familiar, Liam. He was standing by the entrance, holding a coffee cup loosely in one hand, the other in his pocket, looking both hesitant and relieved at the same time. Their eyes met, and for a brief moment, the world seemed to pause, the hum of the city fading into silence, leaving only the two of them and the electricity of recognition. Emma's chest tightened slightly, a mix of nervous anticipation and exhilaration, and she smiled softly. "Hi," she said, her voice steady though her heart raced. "Hi," he replied, his voice carrying the same soft intensity that had unsettled and intrigued her the night before, and without a second thought, he gestured for her to join him inside. The cafe was small, warm, and filled with the aroma of coffee and baked goods, the soft chatter of a few other patrons forming a comforting backdrop, and it felt like a sanctuary where time slowed just for them. They sat across from each other, and the conversation started cautiously, a small exchange of pleasantries about the day, the weather, the mundane details of life. But soon it deepened as if the walls between them had been gently pulled down in the quiet hours of the evening. Liam spoke about dreams he had abandoned, the places he had longed to visit, the passions he had shelved because life had demanded pragmatism and caution, and there was a trace of sadness in his voice, a regret that only added layers to his quiet charm. Emma shared her own stories, the ones she rarely spoke aloud, the disappointments, the small victories, the moments of longing she had tucked away, and as she spoke, she realized how easily the words flowed, how natural it felt to reveal fragments of herself to someone she had only met a day ago. The conversation was sprinkled with laughter, quiet smiles, and fleeting glances that lingered just long enough to leave a spark behind, and every subtle gesture, the tilt of a head, the soft brush of a hand over the coffee cup, the way their knees almost touched under the table, added to the growing tension, a connection that neither of them could deny. Time passed unnoticed, the sun dipping lower in the sky outside the cafe windows, casting long shadows across the wooden floors, and with every passing minute, Emma felt herself drawn closer to Liam, a pull that was part curiosity, part desire, part the hope of something she had almost forgotten existed, the chance to be truly seen by another person. And yet, even as her heart swelled with a mixture of excitement and apprehension, there was a fragility to the moment, a sense that what they were beginning could be easily disrupted by reality, by fear, by past wounds that had taught them to protect themselves. Liam hesitated as he spoke about heartbreaks he had endured, the betrayals and losses that had made him cautious, and Emma nodded in understanding, feeling a resonance in her own experiences, a shared pain that created an unspoken bond between them. There was a beauty in their vulnerability, a silent promise that perhaps here, in this quiet cafe, two people could find solace, understanding, and maybe the fragile beginnings of something lasting. But the evening was not without its complications. A sudden text on Liam's phone drew his attention, a flicker of worry crossing his face, and Emma noticed it immediately, the way his eyes darkened for a brief moment, the way his hand hesitated over the screen, and it added a layer of tension she couldn't ignore. He apologized softly, his voice carrying a mixture of regret and necessity, and she sensed that there were parts of his life she had yet to enter, pieces that were guarded, perhaps even painful. But she did not feel discouraged. Instead, a quiet curiosity grew within her, a desire to understand him, to see beyond the walls he had built. The rest of their time together was filled with tentative laughter, gentle teasing, and lingering glances, the kind of connection that feels both thrilling and terrifying because it awakens emotions one isn't always ready to face. When the evening drew to a close, Liam stood, his movements slightly stiff, as if preparing to step back into the safety of solitude, and yet there was a hesitation, a pause that told Emma he was fighting his own impulses, battling the pull she felt as strongly as he must have. "I'm not sure I can promise much," he admitted quietly, his voice low enough that only she could hear, "but I know I don't want this to end tonight." Those words, simple yet profound, made Emma's heart flutter in ways she hadn't expected, a mixture of hope, longing, and the recognition that something significant was unfolding, something delicate and fragile that demanded attention, care, and courage. She nodded, understanding the complexity of his hesitation, feeling empathy for the man who had stepped into her life so suddenly, and yet her own heart whispered that some risks were worth taking, that moments like this, rare and fleeting, could change everything if embraced with openness and honesty. As they left the cafe together, walking under the amber glow of streetlights, the city seemed to hum around them, a soft soundtrack to the unspoken emotions swirling in the space between two people who were beginning to see each other in a way that went beyond words. Emma noticed the small details, the way Liam's coat brushed her arm as they walked, the way he laughed quietly at something she said, the subtle warmth that seemed to radiate from him, and she realized that connection, true connection, was often built not in grand gestures but in the accumulation of small, meaningful moments. By the time they reached the corner where their paths would diverge, a quiet reluctance hung in the air, a shared awareness that the night could end, that life could reclaim its normal pace, but that the memory of this evening would linger, imprinting itself gently yet indelibly on both their hearts. Liam hesitated, his eyes searching hers, as if seeking permission to stay, or perhaps looking for reassurance that the spark they had found was mutual, that the vulnerability they had shared could be trusted. "Tomorrow," he said softly, almost to himself, "I want to see you again." Emma felt a wave of warmth, a tender hope blooming inside her, the kind of hope that carries both excitement and fear because it promises possibility while reminding one of the fragility of life's most meaningful connections. She smiled, a quiet, heartfelt smile that conveyed more than words could, a message that she too wanted to continue what had begun, that she too was willing to step into the uncertainty of tomorrow with an open heart. As she watched him walk away, the rhythm of his steps echoing faintly against the pavement, she felt the pulse of change, the subtle shift that occurs when lives intersect in ways that are unexpected yet profoundly transformative. The night wrapped around her as she walked home, each step filled with anticipation, the cool breeze carrying the faint scent of autumn leaves, the distant city sounds forming a gentle backdrop to her thoughts. She replayed every word, every glance, every quiet gesture from the evening, realizing that sometimes life's most extraordinary moments are hidden within the most ordinary encounters, waiting for one to notice, to act, to embrace. Emma entered her apartment with a sense of quiet wonder, her heart still fluttering, her mind alive with possibilities, and she understood that the connection she had begun to feel with Liam was something rare, delicate, and precious, the kind of connection that could grow into something lasting if nurtured carefully, honestly, and with patience. That night, as she lay in bed, the memory of their laughter, their quiet confessions, and the soft intensity in his eyes lingered like a gentle echo, a reminder that life sometimes delivers moments of magic when least expected, that a chance meeting and a shared evening could awaken feelings long dormant, and that this was only the beginning of a journey neither of them could yet fully imagine but both were eager to explore, a story unfolding quietly yet powerfully, one heartbeat at a time. The night wrapped itself around Emma like a restless thought as she drove home, the city lights blurring past her windshield, her heart still racing from the warmth and uncertainty of the evening she had just shared with Liam, and every turn of the road seemed to echo the quiet pull growing stronger inside her, a feeling she could neither control nor fully understand. She replayed his words in her mind, the honesty in his voice, the hesitation that hinted at deeper stories, and she wondered how someone she had known for such a short time could already feel so important. The radio played softly, but she barely heard it, her thoughts louder than any sound, and just as she reached a long stretch of empty road, her phone vibrated, startling her. She glanced at the screen and saw Liam's name, her breath catching as she answered, her voice steady despite the sudden rush of emotion. He spoke quickly, his tone urgent but controlled, telling her he needed to see her, that there were things he couldn't leave unsaid, things that felt heavier the longer he carried them alone. Without hesitation, Emma agreed, her heart guiding her more than her mind, and she turned the car toward the small park near her apartment, the one with the tall trees and old benches that had witnessed countless quiet conversations over the years. When she arrived, the park was almost empty, the lampposts casting soft circles of light on the path, leaves rustling gently in the breeze, and Liam stood near the fountain, his posture tense, his hands clasped together as if bracing himself for something difficult. As Emma stepped out of the car, she felt the weight of the moment settle over her, the sense that whatever was about to happen would leave a lasting mark on both of them. Liam looked up, relief and anxiety mixing in his expression, and for a brief moment they stood in silence, the distance between them filled with unspoken words and emotions pressing to be released. He began to speak, his voice low but steady, admitting that meeting her had stirred something he had tried hard to bury, that he had spent years avoiding deep connections after past losses had taught him how fragile trust could be. He confessed that he had learned to live cautiously, keeping people at a safe distance, convincing himself that solitude was easier than disappointment, but that something about Emma had broken through those defenses, making it impossible for him to continue pretending that he didn't want more from life, from connection, from love. Emma listened quietly, her heart aching with understanding, recognizing the familiar patterns of fear and longing in his words, and she felt a deep empathy for the man standing before her, vulnerable in a way that required courage. She stepped closer, the space between them shrinking, and in that quiet park, under the soft glow of the lamplights, the world seemed to narrow until it was just the two of them and the truth being shared. Liam spoke of missed chances, of choices made out of fear rather than hope, of nights spent wondering what might have been if he had been braver, and Emma realized how deeply these confessions resonated with her own experiences, her own moments of hesitation and regret. She responded gently, sharing how she too had learned to guard her heart, how disappointment had shaped her expectations, how she had almost accepted a life of quiet routine over the risk of emotional vulnerability. And as she spoke, she felt a release, as if voicing these truths allowed her to breathe more freely. The connection between them intensified, charged with emotion, their shared honesty creating a bond that felt both exhilarating and terrifying, a bond that demanded acknowledgement and respect. Liam reached out, his hand hovering near hers, uncertain but hopeful, and Emma felt her pulse quicken as she closed the small gap, their fingers brushing lightly, a simple touch that carried a weight far beyond its physical presence. The moment felt suspended in time, fragile yet powerful, and Emma sensed that this was a turning point, a crossroads where decisions made would echo far into the future. But just as the intimacy of the moment deepened, Liam's phone buzzed sharply, the sound cutting through the quiet like a sudden alarm, and the change in his expression was immediate, his face paling slightly as he glanced at the screen. He stepped back, his hand slipping from hers, a look of conflict crossing his features, and Emma felt a knot tighten in her chest, the warmth of the moment giving way to uncertainty. Liam apologized softly, his voice strained, explaining that something urgent had come up, something he hadn't expected, and that he needed time to deal with it before he could be fully present, before he could give her the honesty and attention she deserved. Emma nodded, masking her disappointment with understanding, recognizing that life rarely unfolds without interruption, that even the most meaningful moments can be disrupted by realities beyond one's control. Liam promised to explain everything soon, his eyes holding hers with an intensity that suggested he meant every word, and then, reluctantly, he turned away, leaving Emma standing alone under the lamplight, her heart a mix of hope and unease. As she watched him disappear into the shadows, she felt the weight of unanswered questions settle over her, the uncertainty both unsettling and strangely invigorating, and she realized that she had stepped into a story still unfolding, one that demanded patience and courage. She returned to her car slowly, the quiet park echoing with the remnants of their conversation, and as she drove home, her thoughts raced, replaying every word, every glance, every subtle shift in tone, trying to piece together what lay beneath the surface of Liam's urgency. The streets seemed quieter now, the night deeper, and Emma felt a heightened awareness of herself, of her desires, of the risks she was willing to take. She understood that the connection she felt was not something she could easily walk away from, that even uncertainty carried a strange allure when paired with genuine emotion and honesty. At home, she paced the living room, unable to settle, the silence amplifying her thoughts, and she wondered what truths Liam was holding back, what circumstances had forced him to step away just as they were beginning to draw closer. Yet beneath the questions and concerns, there was a steady undercurrent of trust, a belief that the vulnerability he had shown was real, that his intentions were sincere, and that sometimes distance was not a sign of disinterest but a necessary pause before something deeper could emerge. As the night stretched on, Emma found herself reflecting on how quickly life could shift, how a single drive, a chance meeting, and a few honest conversations could alter her sense of direction, and she felt a quiet resolve forming within her, a willingness to wait, to see where this path might lead. She knew there were no guarantees, no promises of easy answers, but she also knew that the emotions stirred within her were worth exploring, worth the uncertainty that accompanied them. When she finally lay down to sleep, the image of Liam's conflicted expression lingered in her mind, a reminder that connection often arrives with complexity, that meaningful relationships require patience, understanding, and the courage to face uncomfortable truths. As her thoughts drifted and the night slowly surrendered to rest, Emma felt a subtle but undeniable shift within herself, a readiness to confront whatever came next, to embrace the change that had already begun, and to trust that this turning point, though unresolved, was guiding her toward a future shaped by honesty, depth, and the quiet power of choosing to feel rather than retreat. Morning arrived quietly, light slipping through the curtains as Emma lay awake, her mind already racing, her heart heavy with questions yet strangely calm. as if some part of her knew that answers were coming whether she was ready or not. She moved through the early hours slowly, making coffee she barely tasted, watching the street below come alive, thinking about the way Liam had looked at her in the park, the conflict in his eyes, the honesty in his voice, and she realized that whatever happened next, she could not pretend that nothing had changed. The day unfolded with an odd clarity, every sound sharper, every moment filled with awareness, and just as the afternoon began to fade, there was a knock at her door, firm but hesitant, the kind of knock that carried meaning. When she opened it, Liam stood there, looking tired but determined, his expression open in a way she had not seen before, as if he had finally decided to stop running. He apologized immediately, not with excuses, but with sincerity, explaining that the message the night before had been tied to responsibilities and unresolved ties from his past, obligations he had avoided facing for too long, and he admitted that meeting Emma had forced him to confront the parts of his life he had kept hidden even from himself. They sat together, the space between them filled with quiet tension, and Liam spoke steadily, sharing the full truth, how years ago he had chosen safety over passion, how fear had shaped his choices, how he had built a life that looked stable on the surface but felt empty inside, and how encountering Emma had made that emptiness impossible to ignore. Emma listened without interruption, absorbing every word, feeling the weight of his honesty, and when she spoke, her voice was calm but firm, telling him that connection meant little without courage, that care without action could not survive, and that while she understood fear, she could not live inside uncertainty forever. Her words were not an ultimatum but a boundary, a declaration of self-respect shaped by years of quiet disappointment, and Liam heard it clearly. He told her he did not want to lose what they had begun, that for the first time in a long while he felt awake, present, and willing to take responsibility for his choices, even if it meant discomfort, even if it meant change. The air between them softened, tension giving way to understanding, and as the sun dipped lower outside the window, they spoke of small things again, grounding themselves in the present, sharing laughter that felt lighter, more real, as if honesty had cleared the weight from the room. Time moved differently then, unhurried but alive, and when evening came, Liam asked if she would take a drive with him, not to escape, but to mark the moment, to return to the place where everything had started. Emma agreed, feeling a quiet sense of completion forming inside her, and together they drove through the familiar streets, the same lampposts glowing, the same roads stretching ahead, yet everything felt transformed. The car moved steadily, the silence between them comfortable, filled with meaning rather than uncertainty, and Liam spoke of plans, not grand promises, but intentions rooted in presence, effort, and honesty. Emma looked out the window, watching the city pass by, realizing that the drive itself was no longer about destination but about awareness, about choosing to stay open even when it would be easier to close off. When they reached the street where they had first met, they slowed, both of them recognizing the significance without needing to say it, and in that moment, Emma felt a deep sense of peace, not because everything was resolved, but because she had chosen herself, chosen truth, chosen connection without illusion. They stopped the car briefly, stepping out into the evening air, the sky deepening into shades of blue and gold, and Liam turned to her, his expression steady, grateful, and real, thanking her not just for the ride that night, but for the courage she had shown since, for meeting him without fear, for demanding honesty without cruelty. Emma felt emotion rise in her chest, not sharp or overwhelming, but warm and steady, and she understood then that love did not always arrive as certainty, but often as a decision made again and again in small moments. As they returned to the car and continued driving, Emma reflected on how a single choice, a simple offer of kindness, had unfolded into something meaningful, how life had shifted not through dramatic events, but through quiet bravery, through listening, through the willingness to feel deeply without guarantee. When they finally parted later that night, there was no rush, no anxiety, only a shared understanding that whatever came next would be faced with honesty and care, and as Emma walked back into her apartment, the door closing softly behind her, she felt a sense of completion settle within her, not an ending, but a beginning shaped by clarity. She lay in bed, the city quiet around her, and thought about how that one drive home had changed her perspective forever, teaching her that connection was not about perfection or certainty, but about presence, truth, and the courage to choose growth over fear. Sleep came gently, carrying with it a calm confidence, and as the night deepened, Emma knew that her life had shifted in a lasting way, not because everything had become simple, but because she had learned to trust herself, to honor what she felt, and to welcome change when it arrived quietly, wrapped in the form of a single, unforgettable drive home.